Welcome to this special edition of Detour 365. I'm Will, of course, the host, and I wanted to give you a little New Year's Eve message, something that I feel led to share at least, especially in light of all the changes and developments that we're expecting in this coming year. And of course the rate of change is always increasing, right? And the world around us, and probably seems the same way in our own lives. So the two passages I'd like to share are Proverbs 3:5-6. Trust in the Lord with all your heart and do not lean on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make straight your paths. So this is the foundational passage for this podcast, Detour 365. Kind of reverse the 5 and the 6 there, but kind of that theme of focusing on, well, studying the Bible, studying the scriptures, but focusing on perception and focusing on how we can apply the scriptures to the decisions that we make, and how we can follow this path of God's will and purpose in our life, especially when we're encountering so much change, so much uncertainty everywhere, and even in our own lives. So that is, of course, something we need to focus on coming into 2024. This is especially important because there's so much unknown, and that's always the case about the future, isn't it? That we don't know what's going to happen. But I've gotten the impression that last year was some sort of transition period, and this might be different for you, but just personally, my feeling was that, and is, that 2022 was kind of the end of an era, and we can kind of go into specifics about what I mean about that in other videos. And of course, if you follow us and you follow the recordings of our actual Bible study, you'll see what I'm talking about when I say that. But 2024, and of course these dates are always arbitrary. This is the Gregorian calendar, so January 1st, and there is kind of a rough relationship to the solar year, and so it's not necessarily purely arbitrary, but just selecting January 1st as a time to look back on things, and also a time to look towards the future. It just affords us a good opportunity to. I know a lot of people who don't celebrate holidays at all, or think that every day is the same, but there is some value to taking a day to look at specific things. And also, if we look at the seasons and the church calendar, not that we have to look at specific passages or sections of the Bible at certain times, but it kind of helps to have that system to where you're going back each year and kind of examining things and seeing things that you might not already see, that you might not have seen before, because you're in a different place, because the circumstances are different every year, and your path might look different, and of course will look different, because nothing ever stays the same. And Philippians 4:6-7. This is always a personal favorite of mine, personal favorite Bible passages. Do not be anxious about anything, but in everything by prayer and supplication with thanksgiving, let your requests be made known to God. And the peace of God, which surpasses all understanding, will guard your hearts, your minds in Christ Jesus. So, if you are ever someone who is concerned about the future, and I think that we all are, that's kind of a human thing, the unknown, especially things that are outside of our control. There's a lot that happens in the world that is certainly outside of our control. There are certainly some things that are within our limited free will and control directly that we can observe. But there's certainly a lot that is outside of our control, and it's usually the stuff that's outside of our control that gives us anxiety, that gives us concerns. But I mean, of course, things that are in our control can do that, but it's often the things that are outside of our control. And this passage has always helped me when I actually remember it and I actually apply it and I actually live like it is the truth. It has helped me immensely because we can focus on the things that we can do and then pray about the rest and allow God to work. And very often, if we can just let go, if we can just allow God to work in our lives in the way that God desires, let go of our own expectations and our own desires in a good way, of course, hand them over to God and pray about them, very often we get better results, but also we get this peace. We get this peace in not trying to be the God of our own lives. And of course, we are made in the image of God. We're given free will and creative ability, and that also there's also a spiritual component to that we can have a relationship with God. But we are not meant to be the masters of the universe. And when we stop trying to control the things that we cannot control, certainly politics is part of that. That's a good example. We can vote, we can certainly do those things and talk to people around us and even engage with people, and we got to be careful about that, because sometimes that can go backfire and go the other way. But people can get very frustrated that another person isn't seeing things in the way that they believe they should see them, and just using politics as an example, that can cause a lot of frustration. And if the vote doesn't go the way that you want it to, or certain policies are enacted that you think are destructive, something like that, it can cause you to despair, and it's not good to do that. Instead, we should pray for our leaders regardless of who they are. I think we have a few good ones, but I won't go off onto that tangent there, but we can certainly see the state of things here, the state of things in the world, and it's always been a difficult, people have always lived in difficult times, and there have always been advantages to certain times and disadvantages to certain times to live in, and we're put here for a reason. We're put in this time and this place for a reason, and that is something that I believe, and that is also something that you can find in the Bible. The story of Esther and the book of Esther is a good example. Who knows whether you were put here right now. Can't remember the exact passage, but the story of Nehemiah, another exile Another exile story that also kind of applies to this, someone who was in a specific time and place and saw an opportunity and was able to rise to the occasion, but he rose to the occasion, speaking of Nehemiah, he rose to the occasion through prayer and also through action. And you can see in his story specifically, and many other stories in the Bible, that God was able to act through the circumstances that were outside of his control that allowed him to fulfill this mission and this calling that he had. So I just invite you to keep those two passages on your mind throughout this year. And really, they're good ones to always keep on your mind, of course, because who doesn't want guidance and wisdom from God, and who doesn't want more peace, and also who wouldn't want help with the circumstances that are outside of their control. It's certainly better than worrying about things. That never helps. In fact, that can be detrimental. You're almost better off just doing nothing rather than worrying about something, because that's not really constructive. Now, I will put a slight asterisk there, because there is a difference between being apathetic and having peace. You don't want to be apathetic, because that means you don't care about what happens and you're not interested. So yeah, you'd be free from worry if you were apathetic, but that's not really what we're called to be. Because if you have apathy, that's a separate issue. The peace that I'm talking about is having genuine concern and intent, not letting go of your desires completely, but giving them over to God and allowing God to, accepting what God will give you in reply, and allowing, because we have this free will, and that's another conversation we frequently have in our podcasts on, the nature of this free will, and people have different positions on this, but we're given this free will over certain things, and we also have free will over what we desire and what we want to happen, what we think will be best. And sometimes we get it right, but who would know better than God, who knows everything and who desires the best for us? So I know I've kind of doubled back on a lot of the items I've mentioned here, but just wanted to share this as we begin 2024. And in sharing this with you, this is more actually a message to myself, to help instill this in my own mind as I go into 2024, because this is something that I will need to remember. And I believe that we will do very well in 2024 if we follow what these passages say to us, if we follow them in the sense of applying them to our lives and how we live and our actions, and in deciding on the paths that we take. And I will also say that it's important to pray about the decisions that seem like they are important, of course, but it's also important to pray in general, because we never know if this or that small decision can have a great effect on our future. And there was some movie about there are different movies and stories about how this could be. Some small action causes a ripple effect, and you can see if the character took this action, how things turned out, and if they took that action, how things turned out. And it could often seem to be something that is totally mundane, but just that simple action. If they decided to go left instead of right, and they ended up meeting somebody, and this person was a significant partner in their life, not necessarily just romantic, but they could be a business partner, they could be someone who can join you in your purpose and calling, or it could be a decision that leads you to see what God's purpose and calling is for you. And very often people get these callings, these great sense of, from noticing a problem or noticing something that they wouldn't have otherwise noticed, and then they realize that, that's what God wants me to do. And this gets back to perception, and this is kind of a core theme in our podcast as we look at these ancient stories and these passages that on the surface sometimes they might not seem like they apply to today, but they very much do apply to today, because we've been given these passages, whether they're stories, whether they're proverbs, parables, poems in some cases, historical accounts. There are all kinds of types of literature in the Bible. They've been passed down and given to us as a guide, and as an example, and on every level too. Archetypes, and we're often called to see ourselves in the story. And in a lot of cases, God is speaking directly to us. If you look at the Sermon on the Mount that Jesus gives, it's very direct advice to you, to me. If you look at the letters of Paul, even though he's writing to these churches that existed long ago, what he is writing can apply to us today, because we still see the same behaviors and urges, and crime is still a thing like it was thousands of years ago. Sin is still the same sin that it was. The technology might look a little bit different, but people are essentially the same, and we all need God's word, and we all need to have this wisdom to navigate through life. And that is really the calling that I see in this whole project. Because not only do we need to look at the Bible for our relationship with God, but we also need the wisdom that is in there to build our lives, and to have the successes, and to be powerful witnesses to others, and to have the satisfaction of following our calling and purpose, whether it is through our job, or whether it is through something else, or a combination of things. And of course, there are general purposes with our families and our relationships that that apply to everybody, and our relationship with God, which applies to everybody. But we need wisdom in how to live, no matter which time we live in. But this is especially true right now, because there's going to be a lot of change that's going to be happening, and we are entering into a time where who knows how artificial intelligence is going to play out? Who knows how a lot of the policies that are being floated right now by governments and institutions are going to play out and affect our lives? And if we look at Revelation and the end times, that's a whole nother story there, because you don't want to unwittingly be fooled. And as Jesus said, when he's talking about the Antichrist who's going to come later, he's saying that this person will be able to fool even the elect, the followers of Jesus. And that's something, not all of them, of course, but there are some people who might believe that they are following God's will, but they end up being tricked, and remember that you are the most vulnerable for being tricked when you believe that you cannot be. So there's an element of humility to all this too. And I know I keep tacking on points to this, but there is an element of humility to admitting that you don't know everything. I don't know everything. And we need God's wisdom to make good decisions. And to have that perception and to see what is behind the veneer of what we see in front of us, the illusion. Because a lot of what we see is an illusion. And so I will leave you with that, but this is a special message. I don't always put out videos like this, but we'll try to do that more. And stay tuned to see the recordings of our podcast. We will be continuing with the Christmas series. One more episode of that as we will look at the wise men. And that will kind of be timed pretty well because Epiphany is January 6th, I believe. So it'll be pretty close to that this coming Sunday. Then we will go back to the parables of Jesus, and we will continue in that series for a while. And that will be very informative, exciting, and I'm sure we will have a lot of great discussions. And so keep that in mind and look for those to come out. And hope you take care, and I will talk to you later.